The UK government has published witness statements at the centre of a row about the collapse of a case against two men accused of spying for China. The Director of Public Prosecutions said criminal proceedings were dropped last month because the government failed to provide evidence that it classed Beijing as a national security threat. The statements, submitted by the Deputy National Security Advisor Matthew Collins, have now been made public. It's understood that Mr. Collins assumed they were enough for a prosecution to go ahead. Here's our political correspondent, Ben Wright.
The collapsed China spy case has triggered an almighty political bust-up.
Something must have changed when the charges were brought and when the case collapsed. The charges were brought under us, the case collapsed under them. Can the Prime Minister tell us what changed and what collapsed the case?
Mr. Speaker, I've said I will publish the witness statements in full, and she will then realise what she's just said is entirely baseless.
And now we can see them. 3 witness statements written by the government's Deputy National Security Advisor Matthew Collins. The first, from December 2023, concludes that the alleged spying by Christopher Berry and Christopher Cash was prejudicial to the safety or interests of the UK. Both men have strongly denied any wrongdoing. In response, Mr. Cash insisted he was completely innocent, not just because the case against me was dropped, he said, but because at no point did I ever intentionally assist Chinese intelligence. A second witness statement from February this year describes China as the biggest state-based threat to the UK's economic security, but also stresses that the government was committed to pursuing a positive relationship with China. A final statement from August, written shortly before the Crown Prosecution Service dropped charges in the case, says the Chinese intelligence services are highly capable and conduct large-scale espionage operations to harm the interests and security of the UK. The former Conservative Attorney General, Dominic Grieve, said the statements hadn't minced their words.
It has to be said that when you read the totality of these statements, you can be left in absolutely no doubt that China was a threat to our national security. So I find the whole thing, I have to say, utterly mystifying.
So it is still not clear why the case collapsed, and this row isn't over. The Conservatives said there remained many unanswered questions, including why the final statement emphasised that the UK wanted to strengthen understanding and cooperation with China. The Prime Minister has blamed the Conservatives for not labelling China a threat when they were in government. Ben Wright, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, our chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman, has more details about those newly released witness statements.
What is interesting is that they lay out in far more detail than we've ever, as members of the public and journalists, known what the allegations against these two men, Christopher Cash and Christopher Berry, were. Allegations which, by the way, are consistently denied, of course, have now not had the opportunity to be tested in court, and it's worth stressing the caveat that these witness statements proceeded explicitly on the basis that those allegations were true, and that's not something that's been established in court. I mean, what is striking, to be honest, what really struck me reading these witness statements first thing this morning is how strong they are about the challenge posed by China. In the first one, Matthew Collins, who's the Deputy National Security Advisor who authored all these witness statements, says there are areas where the Chinese state poses a threat to our people, prosperity and security. In the second one, he describes various ways in which the government believes it's been hacked by Chinese state actors. In the third, he talks of the active espionage threat posed by China to the UK, identifying, in fact, specific activities that the UK believes the Chinese state carried out. So you are kind of left with the question of why on earth this case ended up being dropped when you did actually have the government in fairly strong language describing the ways in which China was indeed, in their perception, a threat to the UK's national security.
And Henry, I mean, what is fascinating about this case, isn't it, is it does show the dilemma that governments going forward will have between China, so important economically, but potentially a security threat.
I mean, look, that's definitely in the backdrop to this, for sure. The government, we should stress, is absolutely adamant that their broader diplomatic, economic, geopolitical approach towards China played no role in the collapse of this case. That is something that the Conservatives claim did, and that's where the sort of political row is here. But look, unquestionably, in the background, you do have all these challenges posed by China, and the biggest challenge is, how much to emphasise the challenge and how much to emphasise the opportunity. We're talking a lot this week, and we will even more in the coming weeks, about the budget coming up and the challenges for the UK economy. Well, there are some in government I speak to who say the UK quite literally cannot afford to take a tougher stance towards China because the UK needs Chinese investment, it needs Chinese trade and so on. But then clearly that is going to have to be balanced to some degree by the security risks outlined in these witness statements and in various other avenues by different parts of government. That is a big, complicated dilemma for government, but in the first place, I think they need to explain much more clearly, and the Crown Prosecution Service in particular is going to have to explain to MPs much more clearly, because I think they still don't know why exactly this case ended up collapsing.